Hello, everyone, and welcome to Singularity One-on-One. Singularity One-on-One is a podcast feature of Singularity Weblog, where you can go and listen to it or download it in full. As you may already know, my name is Nicola, aka Socrates, and as always, I will be the man with the questions. Today, I'm very privileged to have David Simpson as my guest on the show. David is the author of Posthuman, his 2009 debut novel, as well as Transhuman and the God Killers. He has a master's degree in English literature from the University of British Columbia and lives in West Vancouver with his wife Jennifer. So, hi David, and welcome to Singularity One-on-One.
Hey, Nicola, and thank you for having me.
The pleasure is entirely mine, David. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. With the first question, perhaps, can you tell us how you got interested in writing in general and in writing science fiction in particular, and why?
Sure. Those are two really different answers. Writing in general is something that it goes way back. When I discovered I liked writing goes all the way back to the second grade, actually. And it was an assignment that we were given by our teacher to write a chapter out of those little Stuart Little books, those mouse books, which I loved back then when I was a kid. And something happened when I was writing. I wrote way more than any of the other kids in the class, and I still get that kick. I knew right then that this was something I loved. It was like almost like a drug. There was just so much stimulation for me that comes from writing. I didn't know that I would be a sci-fi writer, but I think the reason why it happened is because science fiction to me, I don't find it to be somehow limiting. I don't think that because I'm a science fiction writer, there's other things that I can't write. I think I write about the biggest and most interesting concepts that I can think of. I'm very, very interested in the future and in technology, and I guess Posthuman, that was directly a response to reading an interview that I found online way back in 2005 on abcnews.com for Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil was promoting The Singularity is Near. It had just come out. And I was already, interested in science fiction for sure. I was doing I think I was doing my honors thesis, and I had incorporated a bunch of science fiction into it, which is unusual in English departments. But when I read his interview, the whole plot of Posthuman came to me at that moment in a flood. It was great. I wrote down the whole outline, and I wrote the first chapter that night, and that was all because of him. I'd never heard of him before that, but as soon as I read his vision for the future, it just opened creative doors, and so I'll probably be writing about that for a while.
That's a fascinating story, and I would like to go a little deeper into it. But before we do that, I'd like to set up the stage of the general idea first, if we can, a little better,
Sure.
by asking you, what exactly is the relationship between science fiction and technology, in your opinion? And was it that you had an interest in technology to begin with, and then into science fiction, or was it the other way around?
Uh, you know, it was probably the other way around. I am like almost everybody. I mean, it's hard to find people that don't enjoy Star Wars, and I was a science fiction fan, I think, up to that point, and I was just primed to be someone who is possibly a science fiction writer later, because I read a lot of comic books, and they always dealt with a lot of science fiction themes too. But what really got me seriously considering writing science fiction novels was actually my education. When I was reading in UBC for my first degree, for my undergraduate degree, there isn't a lot of sci-fi, but when I was reading the sci-fi, that was the stuff that I was most interested in. And if it was a dystopian novel, that's fine. It didn't matter. If it was something that was about the future and society and how technology might change things, Fahrenheit 451 is probably a really good example of that. Then those were the works I was really drawn to. And then I got into William Gibson actually because of that. It was through that. There was a class where I was lucky enough that we did Neuromancer. And then I watched a documentary that he did in the year 2000 called No Maps for These Territories, and that was the first time I'd ever heard about nanotechnology and posthumanism, and it just blew me away. Just blew me away. So that's where I started to see stories. But then it was just a little while later when I read that Kurzweil interview. That's when a full story really came to me.
By the way, it's amazing how you have such incredible science fiction writers such as William Gibson in Vancouver. So I can see how that could be very inspirational, and I'm a big fan of his. But so let's go from there. Who are your favorite science fiction authors then? Who has had the most impact on you as a writer?
Uh, I think, I mean, there's a few that I really like. Um, I really do like Gibson. I think Gibson's a fantastic philosopher. I think even if he wasn't a science fiction author, he'd be one of those guys that would just be absolutely fascinating to talk to for a while. That documentary I talked about earlier, No Maps for These Territories, is him sitting in the back seat of a car for 2 hours, and then and there's 40 minutes of stuff they cut that they still put on the DVD. It's just fascinating to listen to him. Um, but I think as far as like a science fiction author that has maybe influenced me or that I try to emulate a little bit, it's actually probably Philip K. Dick. I haven't read all of Dick's stuff, but I've read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep was the first one that Blade Runner is based on, and I've read Minority Report, which is just a short story, and a few others. But what I really liked about his work was it was deep, but it didn't feel like it was deep. You could really enjoy it. He didn't write in a style that was cumbersome or made you feel like you were working to try and get through it. It was just fun right from the get-go. But yet he didn't limit himself. He was dealing with the biggest issues, the issues that I think he thought were the most interesting to write about. And I think that's how I write too.
You just touched upon the biggest issues that one can write about. So let me ask you this: is there an overarching theme spanning across the books that you have written so far? Is there something uniting or a common thread that underpins them all?
Yes, I do think so. My first two books are Posthuman and Transhuman, and they're connected together. Transhuman is the sequel for Posthuman, but my third book is called The God Killers, and even though it's science fiction. It's set in the present, and it's also, I think, it qualifies very much as horror. And because they don't take place anywhere near the same time period, and because they deal with different things, you'd think that there wouldn't be a unifying issue, but I think that there is, and that issue is always about striving for more consciousness. Always, I mean, a repeated motif in posthuman and transhuman is just waking up, and with the God Killers, it's the same thing. I mean, the protagonists in that book feel as though they know something that most of the other people in the world don't know it, and it's that it's up to them to try and save the other people. So. Uh, in all the books so far, some sort of big oppressive force and the protagonists are battling against that, and always it's about self-reliance and more consciousness.
So, do you see yourself and your role as a writer in that sense then as a storyteller or as a futurist or as a philosopher and a teacher?
Uh, well, all of those, but but I think as a teacher, I mean that's a big one. The African writer Chinua Achebe says just very simply, writers are teachers, and I agree with that. I really do, and I think that the best works teach you something, and that's what grounds them and makes them interesting, even if you don't realize that you're learning something. And I don't really want my readers to feel like my work is pedantic or even that it's really didactic. I want them to enjoy it, and I love it when people say that they read the books and they go through them very, very quickly. They'll read them in a day or two, and they'll even describe them sometimes as light. And I think like, I did my job, because they may not realize that they were exposed to actually some really deep stuff. And I do think that you can't really write a good book unless there's an idea that you're trying to get across to your audience. I mean, really what you're doing is you're trying to communicate something. And what drives me and gives me inspiration is thinking, oh, I've got this idea, I've got to tell everybody. And the way that I tell it is through storytelling. And then philosophy comes with that. There's an awful lot of philosophy, especially in transhuman, I think. And then being a futurist, I think, is maybe that's the lowest on the totem pole for me. I try. I mean, I'm really interested in the future. I don't want to dismiss that at all. But in the sense that I'm trying to say, oh, by this time period, I think this will happen. I try not to do that. In posthuman and transhuman, I never do say what year it is, because I find that if you do, you always end up looking silly later on. So I just like to say it's the future. Maybe it's 30 years from now. Maybe it's 100 years from now. But these are elements that will be in the future. But it's a possible future.
You're the fourth of a sort of a series of science fiction authors that I've been interviewing.
Yeah.
The first one was Werner Vinge. The second one was Charlie Stross. Third one was Robert J. Sawyer.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's fascinating how each one of you has a different take on what it means to be a science fiction writer. For example, Werner Vinge's take on it was he's trying to make sense of the universe. And hopefully his work would contribute to other people by reading his books, also accomplishing that goal, making sense of the universe and where we're heading. Charlie Stross, in terms, however, said that, I think his words were, writing plausible lies about an implausible or improbable situation. and analyzing the human condition under the microscope of that peculiar situation. Whereas Robert J. Sawyer has more of a philosophical and at the same time entertaining edge. But one thing that connects you all is the fact that all of you almost underplay the importance of futurism. So in other words, none of you sees their task as predicting the future, which is fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I'm not really sure why that is. I guess we probably, and I shouldn't speak for the other authors, amazing authors, by the way. But I think that it might be that we draw on the people that are really seriously working on futurism, and they inspire us. And personally, I look at my job more as communicating a message through story that they're trying to communicate too, but we're just doing it in a different way. And we're doing it in a way that I think is very entertaining, and also very natural. I think it makes it easier to digest for an audience. Um, when you listen to someone give a lecture, there's a certain segment of the population that's fascinated by that. I am, and I'm sure you are too. And then there's some other people that kind of, tune out or might fall asleep. But if you say it in a narrative, Alistair McIntyre said that man is essentially a storytelling animal. That's what we do, and that's how we learn, and that's how we understand things. We're always constructing narratives. So, I'm inspired by the futurists. I think about possible futures a lot. I've still got there's books still to be written up here. Exciting things I can't wait to write. But for me, it's storytelling and narrative that drives me.
Fantastic. So I think it's about time for us to jump into the meat of the matter here and start
Sure.
talking about something more specific, like your novel, Post-Human.
Okay.
So, uh, what is it about? What is Post-Human about?
Well, from a plot standpoint, this is a book that's set at some point in the future, and it's not a novel that's set post singularity, as some people call it. It's before that, but it is a future that's a lot different. And it was a future back in 2005 when I started writing it. That I didn't think very many people were aware of. And it's exciting to see more and more people become more aware. But it was one that I thought was really compelling. So we have immortality, and we have strong AI, and we have people that have incredible abilities. I mean, the nanobots that they have inside of their bodies aren't just there to to keep them young. They're also there to make their lives, very attractive. Actually, very very easy. I mean, you're not cooking things for yourself. You're not wanting an outfit and having to go to the mall. I mean, anything that you want, you can have, which sounds fantastic. You have an onboard mental computer, so there's no mobile phones or laptops or anything like that. But there is a dark side in the novel, and that dark side is that because everybody is connected that way, they're also very very easily monitored, and there's maybe a tension between all of the luxury that they get to live in, but then this lack of privacy that they also have. And there's other issues that come up too, like space. When we talk about, one of the first things people will talk about when they hear about immortality is, but what about overpopulation? So in the book, the protagonist is a terraformer, and they've already terraformed the moon, and they've terraformed Mars. He's working on Venus at the beginning. There there are intelligence upgrades that happen for the population, and in the first act of the book, the five main characters that are working as terraformers on Venus, they get disconnected from the internet. They don't get their intelligence upgrade, and when they come back, everybody is dead, gruesomely so. And that's the first act that gets the story going, and they have to figure out what happened. And I won't go any further into that, but there are elements that are interesting. It's only the first act. There's lots more still to come. Plus, a whole sequel as well. So it doesn't end there.
I think that's enough information to sort of pique the interest of our viewers into your book.
Hopefully,
Hopefully.
yeah.
Uh, but let me ask you this though. So in a way, this is a kind of an apocalyptic
Mm.
sort of pre-singularity or a soft takeoff singularity kind of a scenario in which 4 or 5 people who were away when the upgrades happened to be the only survivors on the face of the earth. So how is that different from, say, the Terminator or the classical Matrix scenarios? And what's different uh, about your book?
Uh, well, I think that I mean I agree that it's it's apocalyptic. At least the first book and the inciting incident is really apocalyptic. Um, but I guess what I'd say is different is just that I think I am looking at different things. I'm all over the place with posthuman and with transhuman because there's there's so many conflicting visions of what the singularity might be like, or the time just before the singularity, or even the time after the singularity. And I think that maybe unlike the Matrix, where it's it's we really only get one scenario throughout all three of the movies. And the first movie is one of my favorite movies, by the way. I think it's fantastic. But um, with the Terminator, I think that that's pretty close to the case too. I mean, they do, the last movie is set in the future, but really it's telling the same narrative that there's these Terminators that are battling humanity, and that's it. With mine, I'm exploring a lot of different things. I mean, the the so-called gray goose scenario, and the dangers of AI. The humans, or they're a group called purists in my books, versus post-humans, and even androids, and it's just a uh, it really is. It's almost like a smorgasbord of just about every sort of vision that you've heard about, but worked into a very fast-paced and actually clear narrative. I mean, that sounds like it might be really confusing to examine all of those things, but I like to have arcs and twists and turns. We're dealing with one issue. Maybe we're dealing with AI, we think, and then the next moment we're dealing with, the dangers of nanotechnology, or what does it mean to be human? And after we think we've dealt with all of those issues, then we find out that there's even more. The nature of reality versus virtual reality too. I mean, all of those things are covered.
Mm-hmm. So I have to admit that I haven't had the chance to read your book yet, but let me ask you this. Robert J. Sawyer, I recently attended an event with him, actually just a couple of days ago here downtown Toronto,
Mm.
and he sort of leveled the criticism against what he called the previous 200 years of science fiction, starting with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which basically is always, in his opinion, the vast majority of science fiction has been apocalyptic.
Mm.
And when it comes to singularity or AI related science fiction, we've had three major scenarios. We have the Terminator scenarios, in which the AI wants to exterminate us. We have the Matrix scenario, in which they want to subjugate us or enslave us one way or another. And you have the Borg scenario, in which they want to assimilate us
Mm-hmm.
into the collective. But there is no popular, at least, alternative in a sense of a peaceful coexistence between humans and AIs. And that was the motivation for him to write his trilogy WWW, Wake, Watch, and Wonder, because he thought that is actually, in his opinion, the most likely case, for a number of reasons which he posits throughout his books. And he criticized the sort of fear mongering of the traditional 200 years of science fiction. So, since broadly speaking, your book would fall within that camp,
Sure.
call it the Matrix, Terminator, Borg scenarios, broadly speaking, what would your answer to that criticism be?
Well, you're right that broadly speaking, I do fit into that category, but I also fit into his fourth category as well. I I'm everywhere in these two books, and so I can't say to him that I disagree. I know what he's talking about. Um, I'm not so sure that. Um, is it fear mongering? I mean, maybe a little bit, but there is a downside to these kinds of technology. Hugo de Garis talks about it, and when I listen to Hugo de Garis, I mean, when you listen to him for a while, when he's talking about the dangers of AI, I just wish I could disagree with him on so many points, but it's hard to. But at the same time, I don't disagree with the more optimistic ideas. I don't disagree with Robert J. Sawyer's, and I don't disagree with Ray Kurzweil's either. I think that it is a double-edged sword. It can go either way, and exploring the dangers is important. And it also just happens to be more entertaining. But you can find ways of exploring the issues that aren't fear mongering too, and that do make you feel a little more comfortable. And you get all of that in posthuman and in transhuman. Just as a side, which I think is when I think about Frankenstein, which is what you mentioned in some of these science fiction classic science fiction books. When I was at UBC, I got to go see David Suzuki. Needs no introduction, especially in Canada. Probably Canada's national scientist, and he was talking about just the nature of education, and he was talking about how people that are in the arts really need to start getting involved in these important issues about the future, just like the scientists are. But what I found really funny about his talk was that he referenced Frankenstein and 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World. He referenced all of them, but then didn't seem to realize that those are all books. That's literature. We are engaged in these things and have been engaged in those kind of talks for a long time. So I think it's nothing is. Nothing's off the table with English. That's why I love literature, and there's a dark side. You should explore that too.
So transhuman is the sequel to posthuman.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding of the terms is that transhuman comes before posthuman.
Yeah.
So, how is it that the second book is called Transhuman rather than the first one, and why?
Yeah. You're not the first person that said that to me. I've had some readers ask me that question before. People that read the books will understand that there's a reason, but I can tell you as a writer why that was a choice that I made too. And the reason why was because in the books we really are exploring the nature of humanity, in a fun way, hopefully in an action-packed way, but we are exploring it. And in the first book, the attitude is really that once we've changed ourselves in these sorts of ways, once we have immortality, once we have onboard mental computers, we're not human anymore. There are humans and then there's us and we're something else. So we're post-human and we're different. And so the titles really reflect more of, I guess I would say an evolving realization that, maybe we're not really post-human just because, because we're changing. The epigraph at the beginning of Transhuman is a quote from Charles Dubois, but it says, "The most important thing is this, to be ready at any moment to abandon what we are for what we could become. And I think that's a very human concept, and that there's no sin to having nanotechnology. That's just a personal opinion, and it's the opinion of some of the characters, and there's other characters, of course, who disagree, and I try to give all of those different voices a hearing, but that's what it's about. So it's this idea that we aren't human anymore, and then kind of coming back a little bit and thinking, well, maybe we're still human, and that's why. So that's why I'm reversed on the terms there.
That's very interesting. I very much like that take on it. It's worth looking into it. Definitely, yeah. I like that. So, is there a third book coming after Transhuman?
The reason I laugh a little bit is because I get asked that question a lot, and I think it's really great when one of my readers is asking, is there going to be a sequel to Transhuman? But I think that Transhuman, at least in my, and I know this is a bit of a disappointing answer for those people, but I tried to take Transhuman as far as I could towards the singularity, and I do disagree with people who think that you can write post singularity. I just think that's because I don't think that quite understands the concept. I mean, the idea is, it's not the singularity if you or I could understand it. At least that's the definition that I'm working from. When the singularity comes, I don't think we'll know it came, because it will be, I guess you were saying that soft takeoff, but sort of like a smooth transition. I think it will be that way anyway. I don't think there will be a day where the government makes us become robots or something like that. So I think it'll be. I think it'll be really smooth, and so in Transhuman, I tried to push my imagination right to a scenario for what would be, I guess, what you'd call like a hard takeoff, like something where. To write much more of it, or to write a whole other novel, I would have to have augmented my own brain and, have increased my intelligence. So, maybe at some point, though, I don't want to close my mind to it. I do think about it sometimes, and I've thought of sort of scenarios where maybe even that isn't quite the singularity, and we can push it even further. And the good news, though, for readers is that there will be a prequel, though. I'm really interested in how we get from right here to how we get to the setting that we have in Posthuman. And I actually do have that book all plotted out and planned out, and it's going to focus on a character that is nicknamed Old Timer, and people who've read the books will remember him. And we go back and we find out about his backstory, and he lives through our time period and then ends up in that post-human scenario. So and it's I think it might be the most exciting one of the books once it's finished.
Fantastic. Do we have a working title on it?
We do. The working title is Subhuman. Subhuman, yeah, but we'll see. We'll see. I find that I do change my titles usually when I'm writing the books.
Fascinating. So, for those of us who would like to follow up on your upcoming work and discover more about your previous work and about yourself, what's the best place to go and get more information?
Well, I've got a website, and the website is post-humannovel.com. If you go to that website, Posthuman is available for free as an e-version of that. And I know people love free stuff. So it's completely available, and in fact, that was just yesterday that I released it for free. There's a PDF version, if people just, if you don't have a Kindle yet or a tablet or any of those things, and you just want to read it on your PC, that's possible. But there's also a Kindle version that you can get right from my website for free. I would have it on Amazon for free if I could. I just I didn't have the ability to make that happen. But you can get it from my website. You can read excerpts of the God Killers and Transhuman there as well, and read a whole bunch of reviews and connect to my blog and connect to Facebook on there as well. And then as far as getting your hands on a copy of the God Killers or Transhuman, the best thing to do is go to Amazon.com. There's Kindle versions for 99 cents. So that's the cheapest way of getting them. But you can also get paperback versions too. That's possible too if you're old school.
Fantastic. So, David, I'd like to close our interview today with the following question.
Sure.
Do you have a single message that you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from this interview today?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's amazing that that I'm included in this series of interviews with these incredible science fiction writers that you've been talking to recently about the singularity. And the message that I would love somebody to take from this isn't so much about the singularity. It's more just inspiration, because my background, my biography. I don't really talk about it too much in public, but I'm a high school dropout, and I also have a master's degree though from the University of British Columbia. Should have got up there on the wall behind me, and I've written 3 books, and I've reached an audience, which has been a blast. It's been just so much fun, and so the message I'd love people to take from this is, whatever it is that you want to do, whatever your dreams are or whatever your goals are, just keep working towards them, and eventually you'll get there. I might not be all the way there yet, but I feel like I'm getting there. So that's the message I'd love for everybody to take.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for being with us here today, David.
Thanks so much for having me, Nicola.